Welcome to another episode of Living Justice, Living Leadership. I'm your host, Lee Fisher, Dean of Cleveland Marshall College of Law at Cleveland State University. You know, I've had the great privilege to live my life at the intersection of the public, private, nonprofit, and academic worlds. As a lawyer, CEO of 2 nonprofit organizations, and as a state legislator, attorney general, and lieutenant governor. And the lessons I've learned come down to just 2 words: justice and leadership. That's why every week we'll talk to people who are walking the walk. Some are lawyers and some are not, but all of them have something in common. They are change makers. They are guardians of justice. They are living justice, and they are living leadership. Welcome back to the podcast interview with former Ohio Attorney General Benny Montgomery. The last time we talked about Benny Montgomery's time not only as an elected official, but in the private sector. But now we're going to focus on her time as Attorney General and what she views as the future of the Republican Party, both nationally and statewide. Let's now move to the position that where you and I cross paths the most. In 1990, I was elected Attorney General in the closest race in Ohio political history. My margin of victory, you may recall, was 1, 2, 3, 4.
I remember because you left it on our computers, or you took off some of your staff took those numbers off our computers.
I didn't know that. That's interesting. Okay, I'm learning something right now. That's good to know.
Yeah.
So I loved being Attorney General, but we get to 1994. I'm running for re-election, and all of a sudden I hear that my friend State Senator Benny Montgomery is going to run. Why did you decide to run for Attorney General?
Well, Lee, nobody thought you could be beaten because at the time, the worm hadn't turned yet at the national level.
Right.
We didn't have a governor's. At the time, we didn't know that the governor's race on your side would fall apart, which are the atmospherics that you had to run in. And we'll talk about that in a moment. So at the time, nobody was running for Attorney General because you had raised a lot of money. Everybody knew you were going to be running for governor. And nobody signed up for that slot because they thought they would be cannon fodder. So the minority leader, who then would soon become the speaker, Joanne Davidson, and I, and another legislator were away on a weekend down to Hocking Hills. And before I left, she got me in a corner. They both got me in a corner and said, there's nobody running. Nobody is volunteering to run. This is a time where you can put a woman on balance the ticket because there were no women on the ticket. And A, and B, although I didn't believe that premise myself, the second premise is that then you would be first in line after Lee runs for governor because you probably won't win. And I believe that I said, okay. And they said, we're not going to let you go until you agree to do it. So I said, I will do it, but I don't agree with you about, I understand that I'll run, but I'm not going to agree that I'm going to lose. And so my first polling, I think it was so bad. You were so well known, and I was not known, obviously, that when I walked out of the room, Terry Casey, who you will know, is not a warm and fuzzy guy.
Right.
Is usually the guy that delivers bad news with a chuckle, came running after me to say, well, it's not really as bad as it looks. So, and I thought, well, I wasn't discouraged by that. I didn't expect to do that well against you in a poll. But then I didn't have any money and we just worked really hard. And so it's always the story about if you don't suit up, if you don't go to bat, if you don't swing at the ball, you can't hit a home run.
That's true.
And so I just, you do fundraising, and these fundraising. Fundraising is you go out, you say to somebody, I'm running for X. Would you support me financially? And if you're a Republican or a Democrat, you go to your Republican supporters and they write the begrudging, she can't win. I'll give her, I'm a Republican. They write the obligatory Republican check or obligatory Democrat check, as it might be. And then by just the beginning of summer, my polls had started to change. So I went back to those same people, and then they wrote I'll write this check, don't come back again. Oh hell, I'll give it to you, but don't call me again. And then in October, I went back to them again, and they said, oh my God, it's the, oh my God, I better give her money check.
Right, exactly. She actually might win now.
Yeah, because what happened was, for all of those folks listening to this, beyond Lee's control is he had the top of the ticket basically collapse into no campaign at all, really. I mean, literally, most unusual governor's race I have ever heard or read.
Our nominee was by the name of Rob Birch. He was a state senator, running
Right.
against a guy by the name of George Voinovich, the incumbent governor.
Right. And so he collapsed into driving around with his campaign manager by himself. Literally, at least that was what Republicans said.
Right.
It was just such a non-campaign that the governor had a lot of money free, which is and he wouldn't let it go because they were afraid. For the longest time, they thought that you would unleash all this money against me. So at any rate, it was all these politics. So that collapsed, and then Newt Gingrich and the contract with America took hold, and all of a sudden the worm turned nationally. You had the top of the ticket dictates who comes out to vote. And so all of a sudden, and I give myself credit, I got myself to the point where I was within a few points of you, which is I could never have beaten you if that had not happened.
But you're right.
I would not have been able to beat you but for what happened at the national level.
On the other hand, though, you couldn't have won if you hadn't on your own gotten so close to me.
Right. And so, what's interesting about all of that is the day that we did, you dropped an ad against me that was.
I remember it very well.
I do too. And I was.
And we can say on the air it was a negative ad against you.
Right. And right. By the way, I have pretty thick skin about negative ads, but I thought that it went right after me on child abuse and the way I handled prosecution of child abuse. And so I was able to just bring down my entire prosecution, the team, and say, look, I think these people are all Democrats. I can't tell you, I haven't asked them, and I haven't told them what to say. Here's the team. You ask the questions to the press. But the real story there is the day that you dropped that ad, I walked in my campaign managers. I walked into campaign headquarters. You don't know this, I don't think.
No, probably.
And everybody is doing high fives. Everybody is happy. I'm not thinking this is really something to be happy about. And they said, because our internal poll had crossed and we were now 1 point ahead of you. And they said, this confirms that their internal poll did the same thing, because they would never have dropped an ad against you. They've been ignoring you all this time. And the press has been ignoring you all this time. And then the press says, well, why would he do this? Anyway.
Your team was right, by the way, that there was
by the way,
yeah,
all that, oh my God, I better write you a letter. I'll write you a check because you could win. 8:30 the next on the day after the election, I was foolish. I went down to campaign headquarters. Now, these people are still not sober. There's someplace in a hotel room, someplace celebrating with all I couldn't get into my campaign headquarters because the doors were locked because nobody was in headquarters. Foolish me. But I am told that there were a whole bunch of checks that had been pushed through the.
Oh my God, is that right?
Yeah, because at that point, people are, it's just
they want to be on the side of the winner.
Yeah, we want to be on the side of a winner.
That's right.
But the truth of the matter is that would have. I did my job. I'm really proud of that. But I also know that I wouldn't have won, and you would have won handily, but for. We only had enough money to. We ended up buying 5 weeks out, and and I had to beg and borrow for the 2 weeks before I almost had to go dark. And if I had to go dark, I was going to lose.
Right.
And that's when George Voinovich came in with some money for me.
Right. By the way, when you said Joanne Davidson, and you said one other person, who was that other person who also convinced you?
It was Jackie O'Brien, and I don't know that you know her. She's from Hamilton County.
Well, I just need to know who to blame. Now it's so it's Jack. I'm going to track down Jackie O'Brien, and of course, I know who Joanne Davidson is, but now I know the two people. That's what it all goes down to. That meeting. If it weren't for those two people, I would have been reelected for Attorney General.
Right. And I just thought, and this goes back to a question you asked about being raised. I can remember when I was thinking I was going to be running for governor. My father was with me, and we were sitting in my office, in my study, in my house, and he looked at me, and I was really discouraged. And he looked up at a book that he had assigned me to read between The Power of Positive Thinking and another, I won't bother you with, his name is Hill, is the author. And he said, honey, you need to reread chapter 15 of that book. And it was all about, thinking positive and staying focused. And that goes back to just the way you're raised. I think the way because there's always somebody in a campaign that wants to be the first to give you all the negatives, all the bad stuff. And you want to listen to appropriately negative things, but you need to focus on winning and what your mission is, and not on all the peripherals. And that's what I tried to do.
Betty, I'll tell you a brief story that I don't think I've ever told you, although maybe I have. You'll have to tell me. But you're right. We were ahead in the polls pretty handily at the beginning of the race. And as we saw Rob Birch end up being the weakest candidate for governor probably in the last 2 centuries.
Probably in the whole history of Ohio.
He didn't have one television ad in the entire campaign, not even one. We realized that we were in trouble because the top of the ticket does often, not always, but often affect what happens at the rest of the ticket. So I remember a couple weeks out, my staff saying, Lee, you're ahead. But if you don't run a campaign that is somewhat negative against Benny Montgomery, right, she's gonna beat you. And I hated negative commercials, as you did. All of us do. And it took them about, maybe a week, every single day for hours trying to convince me. And I finally said, okay, we'll do it. So we put the ad up, and there's an immediate backlash by some of the newspapers, and particularly my newspaper, The Plain Dealer, who said that they felt that we went over the line and it was overly negative. And the truth of the matter is, I agreed with them. And I said to my staff, I said, look, guys, I should have followed my instincts. This was not the right ad to run. And they said, well, Lee, here's the deal. Since you started running the ad, all of a sudden, Benny Montgomery stopped doing better. In other words, she stopped rising in the polls. We think that based upon what we're seeing here, that this ad actually is having an effect.
Right.
And if you keep that ad on, we believe you'll win. You won't win by very much, and you'll be the only Democrat probably to win, but you'll win. And I said to them, guys, there's got to be other ways that I can win. I don't feel comfortable with this. I've got even my own friends in the Democratic Party telling me that they don't like the ad. I've got the Plain Dealer telling me, and the bottom line is I don't like the ad. So against the advice of my pollster, my campaign advertising agency, and my campaign manager, I said we're pulling the ad. Now, I don't believe I lost just because of that. Many of them do. But in a strange way, if I was going to lose, I'm glad I lost because I pulled an ad that I shouldn't have run to begin with. And that's a story I don't think I ever told you.
That's interesting because I thought that, no, I didn't. And Lee, I would suspect that the people that put the ad together were all men.
Probably were. Yeah,
yes?
You're right. I think you're probably right.
And if you had women, because we've seen, this is like the Voinovich ad that ran against Metzenbaum, which was the negative about pornography.
Yeah, I remember.
I don't know that there was any woman in the room when they made those decisions. And there's a different sensibility between men and women, as there are regional differences. So it's
right.
It's a very, for those of you who are watching this, the practice of just getting elected and all that is, Ohio is so diverse that what works in Hamilton County or Northwest Ohio isn't going to work in Central Ohio or certainly in Cleveland, Ohio. Although in Cleveland, Ohio, you don't you have a much more rough and tumble, I think, politics
I think that's true.
some of the other areas.
I think that's true. So you then serve as Attorney General. So let's talk about your time as Attorney General. You did a number of excellent things. What you were most proud of during your time as Attorney General? And for those who don't know, describe what the office is like. Obviously, I know a lot about it, but most people listening probably don't.
Well, the office is, you represent all the state agencies and you represent all the universities and 2-year and 4-year. And so you are the public's lawyer. But that's your given jurisdiction. But as you know, Lee, that beyond that portfolio that you're given by law, you can do anything. You can say, let's do X. I see a problem here. Let's see if we can focus on this and direct time, energy, funds to doing some things outside of that. As Attorney General, you oftentimes are the bread and butter is defending your state that gets sued over what ODOT did to somebody's mailbox or very serious things, defending school funding against a challenge about the constitutionality of school funding. And I wanted us to have a voice in the policy at the national level. And so I went out and looked for the very best advocate I could find. And thanks to you, you had opened up you had created a position called Solicitor General.
Yes.
I, of course, never called my Solicitor General. I figured there were two generals in government. It was the Attorney General, and then, there were Inspector Generals, there was the Attorney General, and then there was the Adjutant General. And that's all the generals we needed in government. So I called him a solicitor, and we went out and got the very best. He's now a Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals judge.
Is that Jeff Sutton? Yeah, Jeff Sutton. Yeah.
And he brilliant. He had been a clerk for several Supreme Court justices, and we worked really hard to. And for 7 out of the 8 years that I was AG, we won Best Brief Award. As given by the National Association of Attorneys General. I was very proud of that. I didn't have anything to do about it except hiring the right person.
Sure.
And then we were, why do you want to do that? Because you can shape the argument and hopefully the decision of the court on major issues. And we were able to do that. For example, the voucher case out of Cleveland, where there was a challenge with the failing city schools in Cleveland. And the legislature responded by creating a voucher program where particularly inner city kids, it was really a civil rights case, to be honest with you. The failing schools where kids are trapped could take a state voucher, and go anywhere they wanted. Basically, they went to parochial schools, and there was a challenge to that. And we went all the way to the Supreme Court on that and won. And again, I didn't make the argument. I chose the person to make the argument. And I was really proud of getting Judy French to do that. Because
Judy French was the person who made that argument.
Yes. I had all these people behind the scenes pushing me to get there was a whole group of national people. Wisconsin was expected to take the case to the Supreme Court. Wisconsin won their case at the Supreme Court of Wisconsin, and there was no appeal to the Supreme Court, or cert was denied. So it came to us. we had a case pending in line, and the court accepted certification to argue. And we were getting all this pressure and threats, and again, threats by the like of folks that are John Walton, where I ultimately got a threat sent to me through a statewide official who said, I hate to tell you this, but I have to tell you this because I've been asked to tell you this. If you don't let them make the arguments in the Supreme Court, your future is over, because they will do everything they can to defeat you politically. And I said, well, I don't care what they think. I know, and Lee, you know, we have excellent lawyers, and it's our case, and I am not giving it to somebody else, some paid. They may be very good, but I am not going to denigrate this office by giving away this major of a case to somebody, because I don't think, I might have them get mad at me. And what's interesting is that the lawyer that I picked, I knew was good, because none of the 3 Solicitor Generals of the United States had talked to me without me asking, had written to me or called me and told me how good she was. I knew she was good, but now I had somebody who knew how to argue in front of the Supreme Court telling me she's special. And Walter Dillinger to this day said it was the best Supreme Court argument he'd ever heard. Judy had
and she later became a Supreme Court justice, Ohio Supreme Court justice.
Judy made the argument, and she had been raised in all public schools. So here's a small, diminutive woman raised and gone to all public schools, including Ohio State University Law School, going up in front of the 9 Supreme Court justices, and she was brilliant. And I was very proud of that. And I didn't, as an administrator, the best thing you can do is set the policies, set the curbs, get the right people in the right seats, and then make sure that things are getting done, but hire the right talent. And I was very fortunate to have, and they're still here. And a lot of them were there when you were there, just really quality public servants.
You're right. One of the most important attributes of a great leader and executive is hiring and empowering the right people. And you did that with Jeff Sutton. You did it with Judy French. I did it with people like Kate O'Malley, who later became a federal judge. And it is a sort of legacy that we leave that I think is important. Was there ever a time, Betty, that you took a position as Attorney General that was contrary to your own political beliefs, that you might have taken a different position if you had been a legislator as opposed to Attorney General? The reason I ask that is that sometimes Attorney Generals do have to do that. It's the nature of the job, and I wondered if you ever had one of those.
That's a really good question. I don't think I had anything that was dramatic. But as we all know recently, over the last few years, where attorneys general have taken positions that say, we don't have to defend this law. Yes. First of all, remember, I was an attorney general with a generally rational General Assembly. It was not, Vern Reifus and Joanne Davidson were basically middle of the roaders. They maybe a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right, but basically middle of the roaders. Stan Aronoff and Dick Feinen were basically middle of the roaders. They didn't go too far right or too far left. And so I wasn't having to defend lawsuits that are on legislation that was really crazy, like but that being said, since that time, we have had attorneys general say, I don't have to defend the law of my state. I absolutely disagree with that. I raised my hand and said I would defend the Constitution and the laws of the state of Ohio, as well as the United States. I am not the one that gets to write the law. I don't get to say I'm not going to defend it, therefore it won't be defended. And therefore I'm the one person who can say yay or nay and perhaps. Right. But if that were the case, if I were confronted with it, because of the uniqueness of the office, as you know, I could have hired somebody to make the defense that that I would not have wanted to make because I didn't agree with it. And then I could have hired somebody or I could have argued on the other side. We could argue both sides as uniquely as a law firm. We can take both sides. We do all the time. There are times when we're defending ODOT at the same time the environmental section is taking one side and say ODOT, the transportation department, is taking another side. So it's a great office. I loved it, and I know you loved it.
Betty, one of the things I've noticed, it's very different from when I was Attorney General, is how partisan many state attorney generals have become. And for example, there was no Democratic Attorney General Association or Republican Association. Now, the attorneys general, my impression is, are not as close personally as they used to be, Democrats and Republicans in my day. Why did that happen? How did it happen? And is it good or bad?
Well, it happened when I was Attorney General. And what had happened was, and this is really a lesson in history. When you have an organization that is top heavy with, say there are two, I'm going to simplify this, say there are two groups of people, and one group is large, is a vast majority over the other one. Sometimes if they've stayed in the majority for a long time, they forget that there's a minority opinion, and they don't acknowledge, or they don't even realize that their language or the way they do things is offensive or contrary to the way the minority group believes. So that's where, for example, with Stan Aronoff, who was our Senate president, now part of it was because we were so evenly divided, but part of it was he was smart enough as a leader to understand you have to give the minority a voice.
Yes. And
you have to give them a reason to feel as if they want to work collaboratively. What happened at NAG was we had such an overwhelming number of Democratic.
By the way, just so people don't know what NAG is, National Association of Attorneys General, also known as National Association of Aspiring Governors.
Yeah, that's right.
Go ahead. I always like to define the acronyms.
Yes, thank you. Sure. Well, NAG was we had overwhelmingly more Democrat attorneys general than Republican attorneys general. And some of them in the Deep South were very, very conservative. And what was happening was, I remember the time when we came out of the White House after meeting with the president, and we had a press conference. And I think it was on, and I know it was on tobacco. And obviously the southern states were tobacco growing states. The northern part wasn't. Mm-hmm. But we had more Democrat we had more Republican, Southern Republican AGs. This is just an example. We came out in front of the national press to do a press conference, and the leadership in NAG were all Democratic attorneys general. So they started speaking as a fait accompli that X, Y, and Z would happen under President Clinton. Well, it was so offensive because a lot of the Republican AGs didn't necessarily agree with that. We were there to discuss. We weren't there to come to a conclusion.
Right.
And that among other things, but frankly, it's kind of the lifelong lesson, historical lesson of if a majority ignores or suppresses a minority, at some point the minority says, enough of this. There's no reason I should collaborate with you because you're not treating me well. So what happened was we had one or two really adamant, they happened to be, as I recall, it was the Virginia AG who said, enough of this, enough, and started the Republican attorneys general. And there were enough grievances. And it wasn't just because of what happened at the White House. That's just an example. But there were enough grievances that they started the Republican attorneys general. And since that time, the grievance culture, because it works, and because NAG's executive directors have not if not paid attention to the cultural things that are going on underneath, in a way, in my opinion, the way the executive director you had and I had, it just, and as we became, certainly after tobacco lawsuit, and I was very proud of that. We brought $34 billion was coming back to Ohio or more. After that started happening, people started paying more attention to attorneys general. Our stature became larger nationally. Yes. And there you have it.
Speaking of partisanship, it has reached new lows in the last number of years. Particularly, I think it's fair to say during the Trump administration, but it's still there even after Donald Trump.
I couldn't agree more.
What are your views about the Trump presidency, the division in the country that exists today, and frankly, the division that exists in your own political party today?
Well, I sit on the state central committee of the Republican Party. Why, I don't know at this point. I am, because I am an optimist by personality, and I think you have to be there to try to be a change agent if you can. I declared to the New York Times during the convention, "Are you supporting Donald Trump?" I said, "Not right now." Why not? Because he's Donald Trump, and you could go through the litany even
Sure.
before. And will you support him if he gets elected? I said, depends on what kind of a president he is. So they called me back several months later, the New York Times, and asked me whether or not I was supportive of him then. And I said no. And I gave them the list. It was a shorter list than as 4 years evolved. And again, Donald Trump is a symptom, a symbol of the symptom of a sense that the public doesn't feel its electeds are paying attention to them. And also, I happen to also think that as we have this change happening, as we are looking around and there are more Black and brown people, and we are not in the majority as whites, I think there's an unease there. So we've got some major changes happening economically, major changes happening culturally, and we have pockets of folks, of groups that have legitimate concerns that they don't believe have been addressed. And Donald Trump is everything you and I would agree. He's dishonest, he's dishonorable. He is not a Republican. He's been a Democrat, a Republican. He is a Trumper.
Yep.
He is for him. And I don't think he cares about serving the public. I think we would have thousands of people that would be alive today, but for the way he behaved as an abdication of his responsibility as president. So you could get it. And I will be run out on a rail by my fellow Republicans who feel so strongly about him being a good president. But I think he is probably in history going to be maligned as one of our worst ones.
Right now, we're beginning to see Democrats and Republicans, particularly Republicans, line up for the U.S. Senate seat now that Senator Portman has indicated he won't run for re-election. And I've been struck by the fact that so far, all the candidates are trying to out-Trump each other. In other words, who is the most devoted to Donald Trump? They must be seeing something in the polls that tells them that means they're going to win the primary. My instinct, however, though, makes me believe, and I could be naive in this, that it may make it harder for them to win the general. But maybe I'm wrong about that, because maybe Ohio's changed more than I think it has. What do you think?
I think the ultimate poll was November. He won by some 7 or 8 points. And right. So he's very popular in Ohio. He's very popular among Republicans. He's lost a lot of women and educated. The demographics of the party has changed. We've basically stolen a lot of Democrat folks.
Southeast Ohio,
who think that the Democrat Party has not been, has taken them for granted or not, whatever the grievances are. So I have been struck by that myself and saddened because I think as long as um, they're they're looking at the polls, they're saying, I can't win if I don't say I love Trump.
Right.
I don't know that that's the case. And if not, we'll see, because if the Democrats put a rational, not foaming at the mouth quality candidate, I think they will have a hard time winning, because I think there is a lot of the Republican majority. That's why Trump lost. Remember, Trump didn't help those Georgia
No, he didn't. That's right.
senators.
That's
And
right. Well,
but the problem is
you're
that
right.
he has a lot of money, and he has a hit list, and he very publicly has a hit list that he'll use the money against these candidates, and that's, I think, what fuels them. Although, I mean, and I don't want to presume that Jane Timken doesn't agree with Trump. I don't mean to presume that Josh Mandel doesn't agree with Trump. They may very well. It may not be a political decision. They may agree with him.
Right,
Understand,
sure.
there are a lot of Republicans that do agree with less regulation, less taxes, fair share, internationally fair share support of responsibilities around the world, and that. So, I mean, and I think of the 16 Republicans that were on that stage during the primary, most of them would agree with that.
Yes.
But we were at a time when I think both parties were saying it's time for a change. And, at least in the Republican Party, it was like, we're going to blow everything up because what's working, what is there doesn't work. We're going to blow it up and we'll start over. I think it was they needed an iconoclast, and they found one.
Ohio has always been a state that, with a few exceptions, tends to elect moderates, moderate Republicans and moderate Democrats. There are exceptions to that. I recognize that. But when I think of people like George Voinovich, Bob Taft, Mike DeWine, Betty Montgomery, Paul Pfeiffer, Jim Petro, I consider you all to be moderate Republicans. When we're running against you, we call you conservative Republicans. But
Right.
The truth is you're moderates. Just like when you run against me, I'm a liberal, but when I'm in office, I'm a moderate. It's the same idea. But I'm wondering now whether the next U.S. senator will in fact be a moderate, if it's a Republican. And now I'm not so sure.
Well, it's early, thankfully, and
Right.
I know there are stirrings about looking at who's out there other than the ones that are embracing Trump. I know there's stirrings out there. So,
Is Betty Montgomery one of them?
and no,
No? You
no,
would?
I'm not. No, I'm not. I never wanted to go to Washington. What and I know is that local government, state government is where you can solve a problem within your lifetime. Like there's a pothole out there. Let's go fix it. There's a problem with gangs in Cincinnati. Let's put a program together. You can actually get something done instead of celebrating. Although I will say, I think Rob Portman has been enormously, as had, Rob has been very workmanlike, and he works across the aisle.
Yes.
So he gets a lot done. Mm-hmm. But I'm not terribly patient about that. I don't want to celebrate getting an amendment after 2 years of work. I just not, and I guess I've been spoiled by what we could do in the Senate and what we did locally in a county or city level. So, and I also promised my mother I would never go to Washington. So I think on her deathbed, was like, honey, please don't go to Washington, because she saw it like many people do, as a cesspool, or someplace where you couldn't get things done, and people. It was just a different culture.
I'm with you. I think state government is a place that you can get things done. And the further away you get from Columbus and Ohio, the less you get things done. I'm with you on that one. As we end our interview today, I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to go back and put your frame of mind as you're a law student. And the reason I'm asking this question is that even though this podcast is not just for lawyers, it's not just for law students, because I'm a dean of a law school, I want to ask you this. If you could look back now, after all these years of a very successful career, what would you say to a first-year law student? What would you wish you would have known as a first-year law student that you didn't know, but after all these years, how our students should look at law school and a future career in law, if you could give them the advice now?
Well, in full disclosure, may I just say to any law student listening is I hated every moment of law school, period.
Okay.
I hated it. I was a woman, a minority. I was working full time and going to school at night. I didn't have time to properly study, and I didn't understand. And I guess what I would say to a particularly somebody considering going a first year law student and going into the law is I would take a bar review course first to get an overview of what is the law. Don't tell me here's contracts and then there's torts. And well, what torts? Well, it's not contracts, and it's not criminal law. I was actually angry when I took the bar review course and said, if I had only had a sort of an overview.
How things connect with each other.
How do they connect? And I also have a great disdain for the casebook method. I think it's lazy teaching. So, I mean, I bet you a doctor, and when a doctor gets trained, he doesn't get asked, he doesn't say, okay, open up this patient. Now, where do you think the appendix is? Mm-hmm. In law school, we get the majority opinion, minority opinion, the screw loose California opinion. And okay, what do you think the law, how is it evolving? And they're allegedly teaching us to think. And true, for the scholars that will be arguing in the Supreme Court and in the federal courts of the land, this kind of thinking is important and creates thinking. But the truth of the matter is that vast majority of the people who graduate are going to be meat and potato lawyers. They're going to be writing wills. They're going to be advising clients on litigation regarding contracts or accidents or businesses. Or they'll be taking their law degree into business in some way, using it and being aware of where the potential potholes are legally. So I think that a law school education should be go out and get some, while you're in law school, try to buy a Gilbert's or whatever the equivalent is in 2021 mm-hmm. is, that gives you an overview of where do all of these cases, where does everything fit together, so I can have a better understanding. So I'm not learning piecemeal. And then if you have a chance to actually work in a law office or work in a court or by all means, go to your prosecutor clinics or your defense clinics or whatever kind of clinics where you can have hands-on experience and learn what you don't know. That's really important. I graduated from law school, and I think this is different now, but I graduated from law school having never seen a contract, never seen a will, and never written a complaint, never done any of the practical skills that lawyering should teach. Now, I understand that's mundane and pedestrian, and we want to teach up here, but I think there's a happy medium, and yes. Because you have to learn up here somewhere, and up here is sort of the umbrella about what the law is all about, because quite honestly, it's the thing that distinguishes us from the rest of the world, the rule of law. And understanding why we are who we are, how we got here, and what this is all about is really important if you really want to love the profession, because we are problem solvers. I mean, I realize that contrary to what Shakespeare says and what the rest of the world thinks of lawyers, we are problem solvers. We're counselors at law as well as lawyers.
Well, we'll end on that note, and you have been solving problems your entire career.
And creating them too.
Well, we create some, but that, I think John Lewis calls that good trouble.
Good trouble.
Yeah.
And you know what? For all the folks that have been listening, I am so glad you're dean up there. I've heard many good things about you, and I know I'm truly honored to know you, Lee.
Well,
thank you very much for asking.
Betty, I feel the same way. I still wish, however, Joanne Davidson would not have convinced you to run against me. but I'm going to let go of that, because it's ancient history. And I do hope that one of the lessons that people are listening here is that two people who oppose each other in politics can still respect each other, still be friends, still be colleagues. And I think you and I are good examples of that.
Thanks, Lee.
Thank you for taking the time. God bless, and appreciate you taking all the time today to be with us.
Thank you, General.
Thank you, General Montgomery. Thanks, everybody. See you later. Bye-bye.